Welcome back, everyone. We're tackling a topic today that you, our amazing listener, specifically requested.
Yeah, this one came straight from the suggestion box,
A deep dive into cybersecurity design principles.
which is a pretty meaty subject, right?
Exactly. You even sent us the source material, Chapter 8, Security Models and Capabilities from the...
Oh, the CISSP Study Guide, 10th edition.
That's the one. It's a dense chapter, to say the least.
Definitely packed with information.
But don't worry, we're going to break it down together, piece by piece.
Distill it down to the good stuff, the stuff you actually need to know.
And hopefully have some fun along the way, all right? So let's get started.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so the guide starts with some pretty fundamental stuff. Subjects, objects, access control.
The ABCs of security, you might say?
Yeah, like, it uses this example. Process A wants to access data from process B.
Almost like one program knocking on another's door, asking to borrow a cup of sugar.
Aha, exactly.
And that's really the essence of security, right? Controlling who gets to access what.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Whether it's you logging into your bank account, downloading a file,
Or even just sending an email.
every action is a subject interacting with an object.
And those security mechanisms.
They're the bouncers at the door, deciding who gets in and who stays out.
I like that analogy.
Got to keep those digital party crashers away.
Now, the guide also mentions this concept of transitive trust.
Transitive trust, yeah.
I don't know why, but it always makes me think of those logic puzzles.
Well, in a way, it is a bit like a chain reaction.
Oh, how so?
If A trusts B and B trusts C, then A kind of automatically trusts C, right?
That's
But
it.
that can be a slippery slope.
Yeah, because one weak link in the chain.
Exactly. The whole thing falls apart.
The book gives an example of bypassing network restrictions with a VPN.
Oh, right, like at work when they
Yep.
block certain websites.
Yeah, like social media.
But you can use a VPN to get around those blocks,
Because you're essentially borrowing the VPN's trusted connection.
sneaking in through the back door, so to speak.
Clever.
But it highlights how important it is to carefully evaluate who you're trusting.
Not just assume everything's safe because it's connected to something you trust.
Right, like trusting everyone in your friend circle just because you trust your friend.
And not always the best idea.
Definitely not.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about open versus closed systems.
Two very different approaches.
The guide draws a clear line between them.
One's about control, the other's about flexibility, I'd say.
Yeah, closed systems are like those,
Walled gardens, maybe?
yeah, everything is tightly controlled, often by a single vendor.
Think Apple, right? They control the hardware, the software, the whole ecosystem.
Whereas open systems are more like,
Open marketplaces, maybe?
yeah, built on industry standards, so there's more room for interoperability.
Like think Android, right?
Right.
More open, more customizable, more players involved.
But it makes security trickier.
Right, because a closed system might seem safer at first glance.
Smaller attack surface.
Fewer entry points for the bad guys.
But then, open systems offer more flexibility, more choice, more innovation.
And that's why they're so dominant, even with the added security challenges.
Makes you think about that whole open source versus closed source debate, too.
That's a whole other can of worms.
But the guide makes a good point. Open source doesn't automatically equal an open system.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Open source just means you can see the code, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't dictate the architecture.
Exactly. You could have an open source program running in a closed system.
So labels can be deceiving.
Always got to look under the hood, understand the underlying structure.
All right, speaking of building things, let's talk about secure defaults.
The bane of every tech user's existence, right?
Tell me about it. How many times have we been frustrated by those default settings?
Like, why is everything set to the least secure option by default?
Seriously?
But there's a reason for it, unfortunately.
What is it?
Well, it's all about making things easy for the user, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Vendors want to minimize friction during setup, get you up and running quickly.
So they prioritize ease of use over,
Over security, unfortunately.
which means it's on us to change those defaults.
Absolutely. Don't just click next, next, next without thinking.
Take the time to customize those settings.
Based on your own security needs, your risk tolerance.
It's like locking your doors and windows.
You wouldn't leave them wide open just because it's more convenient.
Good point.
Got to be proactive about security.
Okay, and while we're on the topic of being proactive, the guide also talks about failing securely.
Failing securely, yeah.
It even breaks down different failure modes.
Like fail soft versus fail secure.
Yeah, the distinction kind of blew my mind.
It's subtle but important.
Because it's about deciding how the system reacts when something goes wrong.
Right. Does it try to keep limping along? or does it shut everything down?
And that decision depends on what's more important, availability or protecting data.
Exactly. Sometimes you can't afford downtime, even for a second.
Like in critical infrastructure, healthcare, transportation.
In those cases, fail soft might be the better option.
But then if it's highly sensitive data, you want to lock it down tight.
Even if it means temporarily interrupting service.
It's like those security doors in movies.
The ones that slam shut during a lockdown.
Yeah. Even
Uh-oh.
if people are trapped inside.
Containment over accessibility.
Sometimes you got to make those tough choices.
Security is all about trade-offs.
No one-size-fits-all solution.
Got to find what works best for your specific situation.
All right, before we go any further, let's take a breather and talk about the KISS principle.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, that one. It always makes me chuckle.
But it's actually a profound concept, especially for security.
Because complexity is the enemy, right?
Absolutely. The more complex the system is, the harder it is to secure.
More moving parts, more potential points of failure.
The guide talks about things like avoiding redundant code
Minimizing resource usage.
and only adding features when absolutely necessary.
It's like decluttering your house.
Get rid of all the unnecessary junk
It makes it easier to clean, easier to find things.
and less likely to catch fire.
Haha, true.
Same goes for security. Simplicity equals clarity, and clarity equals better security.
Makes sense.
Okay. Are you ready to tackle something a bit more cutting edge?
Bring it on.
All right. How about zero trust?
Zero trust, yeah, that's been all the buzz lately.
It's a pretty radical shift in how we think about security.
The guide puts it perfectly. What if we stopped assuming anyone inside our network is trustworthy?
It's like trust no one, not even your own employees.
Oh.
Because the perimeter's gone.
Right.
People are accessing resources from everywhere.
So you can't just rely on those traditional firewalls anymore.
Exactly. Got to have a different approach.
Zero trust is all about verifying every access request.
No matter where it's coming from, who's making it.
It's like having those airport security checkpoints.
But at every door. Every doorway in the network.
Constantly checking IDs, scanning for threats.
Even if you've already been through security once.
Makes you feel a bit like you're in a spy movie.
Maybe a little. But it's the reality we live in now.
And how do you actually implement zero trust?
The guide mentions a couple of key things.
Microsegmentation, I think it was called.
Yeah, that's about dividing the network into these super secure zones.
Like little fortresses.
So even if one area is compromised, the damage is contained.
Clever.
And then there's continuous verification.
Which means
Every single access request is scrutinized in real time.
no assumptions, no blind trust.
Always verifying, always authenticating.
Sounds intense.
It is. But that's what it takes to stay ahead of the bad guys these days.
Okay, I think my brain needs a break from zero trust for a minute.
Fair enough. Let's switch gears again.
How about something a little less, intense?
Less about stopping the bad guys, more about protecting ourselves.
Sounds good.
How about privacy by design?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's about making privacy a core part of how we design systems.
Not just an afterthought or something we tack on at the end.
Exactly. Baking it into the DNA of technology.
We've all experienced that frustration, right? Privacy being an afterthought.
Like those long, convoluted privacy policies no one reads.
And those cookie banners that pop up everywhere.
Privacy by design aims to change that.
Make privacy a fundamental consideration from the very beginning.
The guide mentions 7 foundational principles from Dr. Ann Kavikian's work.
I remember reading about that.
It's a whole framework for thinking about privacy.
It's about anticipating those privacy risks
And mitigating them from the start.
instead of trying to fix them after the fact.
Right. It's like preventative medicine for your data.
I like that. So it's not just about slapping on a Band-Aid solution after a data breach.
It's about building privacy into the architecture of the system.
Making it part of the design process.
Exactly. Privacy by design is about shifting our mindset.
From compliance to proactive protection,
And it's incredibly important in today's world.
where our data is constantly being collected, processed, shared,
We need systems that respect our privacy.
that handle our information responsibly.
It's not just about security anymore. It's about ethics.
Well said.
Okay, are you ready for one more acronym before we take a break?
I think I can handle it, huh?
All right, how about CISSP?
SACE, as in.
Secure Access Service Edge.
Ah! Yeah, I've heard that one thrown around.
It's becoming a pretty big deal in cybersecurity.
But what is it exactly?
Think of it as the future of network security.
Oh.
It's about converging all these different security capabilities.
Like SD-WAN, secure web gateway, CASB.
and delivering them as a cloud-based service.
So it's like having a one-stop shop for all your network security needs,
Exactly. And it's perfect for today's world, right?
where everyone's working remotely, accessing resources from everywhere.
Exactly.
Mm.
CISSP gives you that flexibility, that agility,
While still maintaining security.
and it aligns perfectly with that zero trust model we talked about earlier.
Oh, right, because it's about verifying every connection.
Every access request, no matter where it's coming from.
No more trusting just because someone's inside the network,
CS is about establishing a secure perimeter
but a perimeter that follows the user.
wherever they go, whatever device they use.
That's pretty cool.
It's definitely a game changer in the world of network security.
All right, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We've laid a good foundation
From the basics of subjects and objects.
to those cutting-edge concepts like zero trust and SaaS,
And we even touched on the importance of privacy.
which is becoming more and more crucial every day.
But there's still more to come,
So stay tuned for the next part.
where we'll delve even deeper into the specific capabilities that make systems more secure. All right, welcome back. We're diving deeper now into the specific security capabilities that really make systems tick.
It's like we've got the blueprint, and now we're looking at the actual tools and materials.
Exactly. And first up, the CISSP guide talks about memory protection.
Memory protection.
It sounds pretty basic, but why is it so crucial for security?
Well, think of it like this. Memory protection sets up these invisible fences within the computer's memory.
Invisible fences.
Yeah, make sure each program stays in its own lane,
So they can't mess with each other's data.
Exactly. Or even worse, mess with the operating system itself.
So it's like preventing those nosy neighbors from peeking into your yard.
Yeah. Or trying to break into your house.
Without those safeguards, things could get pretty chaotic.
Imagine a rogue program overwriting important system files or stealing data from other applications.
Oh, that would be bad.
It could even take control of the entire system.
So memory protection is really about maintaining the integrity and stability of the whole system.
Absolutely. Keeping everything running smoothly and securely.
Okay, the guide also mentions virtualization as a security capability.
Virtualization, right?
How does that fit into the picture?
Well, picture this. You have a big building, right?
A big building, okay.
And within that building, you create these self-contained apartments.
Self-contained apartments,
That's kind of what virtualization does. It lets you run multiple operating systems.
multiple operating systems, wow.
Yeah, all on the same physical hardware, but they're each isolated in their own little world.
So it's like, if there's a problem in one apartment, it doesn't affect the others.
Precisely. That isolation is a huge security benefit.
I see, it's like containing the damage.
Exactly. If one virtual machine gets compromised,
The attacker is stuck in that one little apartment.
they can't easily spread to other parts of the system.
So virtualization acts as a sort of damage control mechanism.
It minimizes the impact of a breach, keeping things contained.
That's pretty clever. Now, there's this hardware thing the guide talks about.
Yeah.
Yeah, the trusted platform module.
Oh, the TPM.
What's that all about?
The TPM is like a tiny little vault.
A vault.
Yeah, built right into your computer's hardware.
Interesting.
It's responsible for storing and managing those super important cryptographic keys.
Oh, the keys that we use for encryption and stuff.
It's exactly. Digital signatures, secure boot processes, all that good stuff.
So why is it so important to have this separate hardware component for the keys?
Well, imagine your cryptographic keys are like the master keys to your digital kingdom, right?
Master keys to my digital kingdom. Okay, I'm listening.
If someone gets hold of those keys, they could unlock all your secrets.
All my encrypted data. Yikes.
They could forge your digital signature.
Oh, no.
Or even compromise the integrity of your entire operating system.
So the TPM is there to protect those keys.
It's like having a safe within a safe.
A double layer of protection.
Even if the attacker gets into the operating system, they still have to break into that TPM vault,
So it's like raising the bar for attackers.
making it much harder for them to compromise the system.
I like it. Okay, the guide then moves on to interfaces.
Interfaces.
Specifically, constrained or restricted interfaces.
Yeah. Yes, less is more sometimes.
It seems kind of counterintuitive to restrict access, though, right?
Well, think about it this way. Not everyone needs access to everything, right?
That's true.
A constrained interface is like having different levels of access within a building.
Okay, I'm following you.
Some people have the master key, they can go anywhere.
But others might only have a key to their office.
Exactly. It's about limiting what users can see and do based on their roles.
So they don't accidentally wander into areas they shouldn't.
Or intentionally try to access things they're not authorized for.
It's like those child-proof locks on cabinets.
You don't want little kids getting into the cleaning supplies, do you?
Uh-huh. Good point.
It's about preventing accidents and also preventing intentional misuse.
So restricted interfaces are really about applying that principle of least privilege.
Give people access to only what they absolutely need to do their job.
Minimize the potential for damage, whether it's intentional or accidental.
Exactly. It's all about reducing the attack surface and containing potential threats.
All right, now let's talk about something that's crucial for keeping systems up and running.
Keeping things up and running. What do you have in mind?
Fault tolerance.
Ah, yes, making systems resilient, able to bounce back from setbacks.
It's about making sure things don't completely crash and burn when something goes wrong, right?
Exactly. Fault tolerance is about building redundancy into the system,
Redundancy.
like having backup systems in place,
So if one component fails, another one can take over.
seamlessly, without missing a beat.
Like having a spare tire in your car.
Exactly. You get a flat tire, you're not stranded, you just swap it out and keep driving.
I can see how that's important for mission-critical systems.
Oh, absolutely. Think about healthcare systems, financial systems, air traffic control.
Systems where downtime is simply not an option.
Those systems need to be super resilient, able to handle failures gracefully,
So fault tolerance is about anticipating those potential problems.
and having those backup plans in place.
It's like having a generator for your house in case of a power outage.
You're prepared for the unexpected, you can keep things running smoothly.
Now, we've talked about all these individual security capabilities.
Memory protection, virtualization, TPM, restricted interfaces, fault tolerance.
All important on their own, but the guide emphasizes that they need to work together.
Like a well-coordinated team.
They need to be part of a larger framework.
And that framework is what the guide calls managing the information system lifecycle.
The information system lifecycle, huh?
It's about taking a holistic approach to security.
Not just focusing on the system while it's operational.
It's about thinking about security at every stage of the system's life.
From its birth to its eventual retirement.
It's like planning a long journey, right? You don't just hop in the car and go.
You need a map. You need to make sure the car is in good shape.
You need to think about potential detours, rest stops, all that stuff.
So managing the information system lifecycle is like creating a roadmap for security.
A roadmap that covers every step of the way.
And the guide outlines 9 stages in this lifecycle.
9 stages, that's a lot.
It is, but it makes sense if you think about it.
We need to consider security at every turn, from the very beginning.
So let's walk through these stages.
All right, let's do it.
What are they, and why is security so important at each one?
Well, the first stage is all about understanding the needs of the stakeholders.
The stakeholders, the people who will be using the system.
Exactly. Before we even start building anything.
We need to figure out what the system is supposed to do.
Who will be using it? What are their security and privacy expectations?
It's like gathering all the ingredients before you start baking a cake.
Aha, I like that. You need to know what kind of cake you're making
And who you're making it for.
and any dietary restrictions they might have.
Okay, so once you understand the needs,
Then you move on to requirements analysis.
requirements analysis.
This is where those general needs get translated into specific security requirements.
So it's like writing down the recipe for the cake.
With the exact measurements, the baking time, the temperature,
We need to define what security controls are needed,
what level of protection is required, what standards need to be met.
setting the bar for security right from the start.
And once we have those clear requirements, we can move on to the design phase.
The design phase, where we actually start putting the pieces together.
This is where we choose the hardware, the software, the network architecture,
And the specific security technologies we'll be using.
like choosing the right baking pan, the right oven, the right utensils for your cake.
We wouldn't want to use a rusty old pan to bake a cake for a special occasion, would we?
Definitely not. We need to make sure we're using the right tools for the job.
And those tools need to be secure, reliable, up to date.
Because security is a core consideration at every step of the design process.
Okay, so we have the design. What happens next?
Next comes development and implementation.
Where we actually build the system.
We write the code, we configure the hardware, we integrate all the different components,
It's like mixing the batter, pouring it into the pan, and putting it in the oven.
but we need to follow the recipe carefully, right?
Make sure we're implementing those security requirements meticulously. No shortcuts, no cutting corners.
Any mistake at this stage could introduce vulnerabilities.
That could come back to haunt us later.
So we need to be very careful, very thorough.
Okay, so we've designed, developed, and implemented the system. What's next?
Next is the integration stage. We
Integration.
need to make sure all those different components work together seamlessly,
It's like taking the cake out of the oven, making sure it's baked through,
then frosting it, decorating it, making it look all pretty.
making sure everything comes together beautifully.
And in terms of security, it's about making sure the different systems can communicate securely,
That data flows smoothly between them.
and that we're not introducing any new vulnerabilities at the integration points.
It's not just about bolting things together.
It's about making sure they fit together securely, that the integration is robust.
All right, so now we have a fully integrated system. What do we do?
Now comes the fun part: verification and validation.
Verification and validation sounds exciting.
It's like the taste test before you serve the cake.
Making sure it looks good, tastes good, and won't make anyone sick.
Exactly. We need to put the system through its paces, test it rigorously.
To make sure it meets all those security requirements we defined in the beginning.
We need to make sure the security controls are working, that the system can withstand attacks.
And that it's compliant with all the relevant regulations and standards.
Verification and validation are about making sure we've actually built what we set out to build.
A secure, reliable system that meets the needs of its users.
And once we've thoroughly tested it, we can move on to the transition and deployment stage.
This is where we move the system from the development environment to the real world.
It's like taking the cake to the party and setting it out for everyone to enjoy.
But we need to make sure the cake arrives safely. Right?
Exactly. We need to make sure the deployment process is secure.
That the system is properly configured and protected once it goes live.
It's not just about flipping a switch and hoping for the best.
It's about carefully planning and executing the transition to minimize disruption.
And ensure a smooth and secure launch.
Okay, so the system is up and running. What's next?
Now comes the real work: operations and maintenance.
Operations and maintenance, what does that entail?
It's like keeping the party going, making sure everyone is having a good time.
Cleaning up any spills, replenishing the snacks.
We need to monitor the system constantly, looking for security threats.
Apply updates and patches, respond to any incidents.
And just generally keep things running smoothly and efficiently.
It's like taking care of your car, getting regular oil changes and checkups.
You don't want to neglect your car, right? Because that can lead to costly repairs.
And neglecting security can lead to data breaches, system outages, all sorts of bad stuff.
So we need to be proactive, vigilant, and constantly looking for ways to improve security.
Okay, and finally, we reached the last stage of the life cycle:
The end of the journey.
retirement and disposal.
This is where the system reaches the end of its useful life.
And needs to be decommissioned securely,
It's like cleaning up after the party, packing away the leftovers, washing the dishes.
making sure we don't leave any mess behind.
We need to wipe all the sensitive data, revoke access permissions.
And dispose of the hardware responsibly.
It's not just about turning off the lights and walking away,
We need to make sure everything is cleaned up properly and securely.
leaving a clean slate for the next system to come along.
This journey through the information system lifecycle has been quite enlightening.
It highlights how security is an ongoing process, not just a one-time event.
It needs to be woven into the fabric of the entire system from beginning to end.
And it's not just about technical controls,
It's about building a security-conscious culture within the organization.
where everyone understands the importance of protecting sensitive information and systems.
So managing the information system lifecycle securely is crucial for building that robust and resilient security posture,
It's about embedding security into the DNA of the organization.
making it an integral part of every process and decision. Now that we have explored these security capabilities and this idea of managing the entire life cycle,
Let's move on to the final part of our deep dive
where we'll put it all together.
and see how these concepts apply to real-world scenarios you might encounter.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into those cybersecurity design principles. We've gone from the high-level concepts to the nitty-gritty details, looking at those specific security capabilities and even the entire information system lifecycle. Now, it's time to see how all of this applies to you, our awesome listener.
It's like we've been assembling this puzzle piece by piece, and now we're stepping back to see the full picture.
Exactly. And to help us put it all together, the CISSP guide has some thought-provoking written lab questions.
Oh yeah, those are great for applying what we've learned.
So are you ready to tackle a few of these?
Bring 'em on.
Okay, the first one asks us to name at least 7 security models and describe their main benefits.
7 security models, wow.
I know, right? We've already discussed a bunch of these, but it's good to refresh our memory.
Absolutely. Let's start with one we're familiar with, Bell Lapadula.
Bella Padula, the one focused on confidentiality.
Right. It's all about preventing unauthorized disclosure of information, keeping those secrets under wraps.
Like those top secret government files we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Only those with the right clearance can access them. No peeking for unauthorized personnel.
Then we have the BIBA model, which is all about integrity,
BIBA, right, making sure the data isn't tampered with.
keeping it accurate and trustworthy,
Especially crucial in systems where even small changes can have big consequences.
like financial records, medical databases, scientific research. You don't want someone messing with those numbers.
No, sir. Accuracy is key in those situations.
Okay, so we've got confidentiality with Bella Padula, integrity with BIBA. Now, there's also the Clark-Wilson model,
Clark Wilson, that one's all about well-formed transactions.
well-formed transactions.
It's about making sure that any changes to data are done in a controlled and authorized way.
So it's not just about who has access, but also how they're allowed to interact with the data.
Right. Think of it like a system of checks and balances to prevent unauthorized or accidental modifications.
Okay, that makes sense. We're up to 3 models now. What else do we have?
How about the non-interference model? This one's pretty cool.
Non-interference, what's that about?
It's about preventing actions at one security level from affecting or even being noticed at another level.
So it's like those soundproof walls in a recording studio.
Haha, perfect analogy. You don't want noise from one room bleeding into another and ruining the recording?
No, you want to keep things separate and isolated.
Exactly. And in the context of security, it means preventing information leakage through covert channels.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, there's also the information flow model, right?
Information flow, yep.
Right.
That one focuses on controlling how information moves within a system.
Making sure sensitive data doesn't leak out or get transferred to unauthorized parties.
Think of it like secure pipelines for transporting valuable resources.
You want to control the flow and protect it at every point along the way.
Precisely. It's especially important in systems with classified or compartmentalized data.
Okay, we're up to 6 models now. What's the last one?
Let's finish strong with the state machine model.
State machine model. That sounds interesting.
It's all about ensuring the system remains secure no matter what state it's in.
State.
Like, is it starting up, shutting down, processing data, or in standby mode?
Ah, I see.
It's having rules for how the system transitions between those states, making sure security is maintained throughout.
So it's about anticipating all the possible scenarios and having security controls in place for each one.
Exactly. It's about building a system that's resilient and secure no matter what challenges it faces.
Wow, 7 security models. That's quite a lineup. It's clear that each one addresses a specific aspect of security, and together they provide a pretty comprehensive framework.
Absolutely. It's like having a toolbox full of specialized tools for different security jobs. You choose the right model, or a combination of models, based on the specific needs in the system you're trying to protect.
Now, the next question in the guide asks us to describe the primary components of a trusted computing base, or TCB.
Ah, the TCB. The bedrock of trust in a secure system.
So what exactly makes up this TCB?
It's a combination of hardware and software components that we consider trustworthy.
Trustworthy, okay.
Like the operating system kernel is a big part of it.
The kernel, the heart of the OS.
Right. It controls access to hardware and all those critical system resources.
So it's like the central command center for security.
Exactly. And besides the kernel, the TCB also includes things like device drivers, security modules, and the hardware that supports all of that.
It's like having a team of security guards, each responsible for a specific area, but working together to protect the whole facility.
Great analogy. And remember, the TCB isn't static.
What do you mean?
It needs to be managed and maintained throughout the system's life cycle.
Ah, right, like we discussed earlier.
Any changes or updates to the TCB need to be carefully evaluated to make sure they don't introduce new vulnerabilities.
So it's like making sure your security team is well-trained, equipped with the latest tools, and always alert.
Exactly. You got to keep that TCB strong and healthy to maintain the overall security of the system.
Okay, let's move on to a question that often causes confusion. The difference between open and closed systems and open and closed source.
Oh yeah, those terms can get a bit tangled up.
Can you clarify the distinction again?
Sure. Remember, open versus closed systems is about the architectural design and how the system interacts with other systems.
So open systems are built on industry standards, making them more interoperable and adaptable.
Think of them like those bustling cities we talked about earlier. Lots of different players, but everyone's following the same rules of the road.
And closed systems are more proprietary and controlled, often designed to work within a specific environment.
like a private club with strict membership rules.
And open versus closed source refers to the availability of the software's source code.
Right. Open source means the code is publicly available, which can be great for transparency and collaboration.
While closed source keeps the code under wraps.
The important thing to remember is that a software can be open source, but still operate within a closed system.
Ah, so those concepts aren't mutually exclusive.
Exactly. It's like the difference between a public park and a private garden. The park might have benches and fountains from different manufacturers, but they all conform to certain standards.
And a private garden can have both open areas and closed-off sections, depending on the design.
Great analogy. So a closed system can use both open source and closed source components based on its specific needs and security requirements.
Okay, that clarifies things a lot. Now, before we wrap up this epic deep dive, let's revisit those core design principles we discussed earlier.
The guiding principles for building secure systems.
Can you remind us of a few of these and why they're so important?
Sure. Let's start with secure defaults. It's about making sure systems are configured securely right out of the box, rather than relying on users to change potentially insecure settings.
It's about making the secure choice the easy choice.
Exactly. Then there's failing securely, designing systems to handle failures in a way that protects data and prevents unauthorized access.
Sometimes it's better to shut things down completely than risk a breach,
Absolutely. We also talked about keeping it simple, the KISS principle.
because complexity is the enemy of security.
Simpler systems are easier to understand, manage, and secure.
And finally, let's not forget zero trust, eliminating implicit trust and verifying every access request no matter where it comes from.
It's a fundamental shift in security thinking that's essential in today's interconnected world.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I've gained a much deeper understanding of what it takes to build secure systems.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating world with you. Remember, security is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
And to all our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this epic adventure. We hope you've learned a lot and are feeling more empowered to make informed decisions about your own security. Stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity.